In the annals of human history, few moments have rivaled the sheer, bone-chilling terror of October 1962. For 13 agonizing days, the fate of every living soul on Earth hung by the thinnest of threads. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis, a monumental stare-down between the United States and the Soviet Union, two nuclear-armed behemoths locked in an ideological death grip. At its heart was the audacious placement of Soviet ballistic missiles in Cuba, a mere 90 miles from American shores, transforming the Caribbean into the potential ground zero of a global war. History, in our reality, tells a story of triumph for diplomacy. A secret deal, fraught with risk and tension, saw the missiles withdrawn, and the world collectively exhaled a sigh of profound relief. The Cold War, while still freezing, had averted its hottest, most catastrophic potential. Humanity had looked into the abyss and, miraculously, pulled back. But what if it didn't? What if, in those desperate moments, the delicate balance of power, the fragile threads of communication, and the razor-thin margins of human decision-making had snapped? What if a single act of aggression, a lone miscalculation, or a defiant, irreversible decision had plunged the world not into relief, but into an unfathomable inferno? Welcome to What If, where we'll dive into the darkest possible timeline. What if the Cuban Missile Crisis went hot? Let's transport ourselves to that fateful moment when the river of history sharply changed its course. It was October 27, 1962. This day is etched into our timeline as Black Saturday, a day of unparalleled tension and near disaster. In our reality, it was the day a U-2 spy plane, piloted by Major Rudolph Anderson, was shot down over Cuba. This horrifying event, while escalating tensions to an almost unbearable degree, ultimately didn't trigger immediate war. Despite the immense pressure, communication channels between Washington and Moscow remained open, albeit strained to breaking point. The world held its breath, teetering on a precipice, painfully aware that one wrong move could spell global catastrophe. But in this alternate history, the response is fundamentally different. The prevailing atmosphere within the White House Situation Room is one of raw fury and visceral fear, amplified by a collective sense of betrayal. The news of Major Anderson's death crackles over the secure lines, a chilling confirmation of direct hostile action, an undeniable act of war. It isn't merely a grave concern, it's interpreted, by an increasingly vocal and influential faction within the military and political establishment, as an undeniable act of open aggression, a deliberate provocation by the Soviets and their Cuban allies that demands immediate, forceful retaliation. The air is thick with a desperate urgency, a palpable fear of appearing weak or irresolute in the face of what many see as a clear challenge to American might and global standing. President John F. Kennedy, haggard from days of sleepless nights and relentless debate, is under immense, almost unbearable pressure. His military advisors, particularly the hawkish General Curtis LeMay, are clamoring for decisive action with an almost religious fervor. LeMay, a man of unyielding conviction and a staunch advocate of overwhelming force, pounds the table, his voice a gravelly roar. "Mr. President," he thunders, his eyes burning with conviction, "this is an act of war. They shot down our pilot. If we don't respond with overwhelming force, we'll be seen as a paper tiger. They'll push us all the way to Berlin, and then where will we be? They'll never respect us. We must hit them, and hit them hard, now." Other voices, like that of Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, urge caution, pleading for more diplomacy, warning of the uncontrollable escalation. McNamara, visibly haunted by the specter of nuclear exchange, argues for a slower, more measured response, reminding the president of the untold millions of lives at stake, of the potential for global incineration. He speaks of the fog of war, the terrible potential for miscalculation, the unknown number of hidden Soviet missiles, and the unpredictable nature of an armed response. He cites intelligence, however incomplete, that suggests the Soviets might only have conventional warheads on the missiles, a desperate hope that clings to the edges of sanity. Yet, even McNamara feels the chilling pressure of the moment, the terrifying possibility that his caution could be seen as weakness, endangering the nation. But the image of Anderson's downed plane, the perceived insult to American sovereignty, the fear of hidden, operational missiles already aimed at American cities, tips the scales. There's a pervasive sense that inaction would be interpreted as cowardice, inviting further Soviet aggression. Intelligence reports, though sometimes conflicting and incomplete, suggest that a preemptive strike might be the only way to neutralize the missile threat before it's too late. There's a widespread, dangerously overconfident belief among the military brass that the Soviets are bluffing, that they won't dare retaliate with their full arsenal if America acts decisively and with overwhelming force. This confidence, born of Cold War brinkmanship and a deep underestimation of Soviet resolve, is a fatal flaw in the decision-making process. The very concept of a surgical strike feels like a desperate prayer, an attempt to rationalize an act that would unleash unimaginable forces. Kennedy, his face grim and etched with an impossible burden, makes the fateful decision. His jaw tightens, a flicker of profound anguish crosses his features, then hardens into steely resolve. The surgical airstrike against the Cuban missile sites, a plan previously debated, dismissed as too risky, and then agonizingly reconsidered, is now given the green light. The argument, desperate in its simplicity and fueled by a sense of imminent danger, is to eliminate the threat before it's too late, to prevent a first strike that could cost millions of American lives. The fear of inaction, of being seen as irresolute in the face of nuclear blackmail, becomes the ultimate catalyst. The order is given, sealing humanity's doom. A pall of grim determination, underlaid by a deep, unspoken terror, settles over the Situation Room. The countdown to Armageddon has begun, not with a bang, but with the hushed, terrified consent of desperate men. Dawn, October 28, 1962. The sky over the southern United States is rent by the thunderous roar of hundreds of jet engines. From airfields across Florida and the Gulf Coast, from naval carriers steaming ominously in the Caribbean, a monumental armada takes to the air. F-100 Super Sabres, F-105 Thunderchiefs, F-4 Skyhawks, F-8 Crusaders, and lumbering B-52 Stratofortresses, each a symbol of American air power, armed to the teeth with conventional munitions, swarm towards Cuba. The sheer scale of the operation is unprecedented, a massive conventional assault designed to cripple the Soviet nuclear presence on the island before it can be used. The pilots, young men, many of whom have only seen peacetime skies, fly with a mixture of steely resolve and profound apprehension. Lieutenant David Miller, a fresh-faced F-100 pilot, glances at the photo of his wife tucked into his cockpit. "Just get through this," he thinks, "just get home." Their targets are meticulously planned, identified by days of intense photo analysis and reconnaissance: the known Soviet medium-range ballistic missile (MRBM) launch sites, the IL-28 bomber airfields at San Julian and San Antonio de los Baños, and crucial command and control centers that intelligence has identified. Their mission briefings emphasized speed, precision, and overwhelming force, to hit hard, hit fast, and ensure nothing could be launched. The initial strikes are devastating. Dive bombers shriek down from the morning sun, unleashing conventional payloads that obliterate above-ground missile launchers, crater runways with massive explosions, and reduce hangars to twisted metal and burning wreckage. Fuel depots erupt in massive fireballs, sending black smoke billowing thousands of feet into the Caribbean sky, visible for miles. Fighter jets engage Cuban MiGs in vicious dogfights over the island, securing air superiority with brutal efficiency, leaving trails of smoke and wreckage in their wake. The island below becomes a maelstrom of explosions and gunfire, a terrifying display of military might. But intelligence, even in the best of times, is imperfect, and in the chaos of war, it's fatally flawed. Unknown to the Americans, some of the Soviet tactical nuclear weapons, shorter-range missiles designed for battlefield use against an invading force, have already been deployed and are fully operational, carefully hidden and camouflaged within the dense Cuban jungle or hardened bunkers constructed with unexpected speed. These are not the large strategic missiles, but fearsome devices nonetheless, capable of widespread devastation. And critically, a handful of those more powerful MRBMs, either due to hardened bunkers, last-minute dispersal, or sheer luck, survived the initial barrage, their crews grimly ready to retaliate. The surgical strike has wounded, but not eliminated, the nuclear threat. In fact, it has merely poked the sleeping dragon, rousing it to full, terrifying wakefulness. The American assumption of a clean, decisive victory is shattered by the brutal reality of an opponent equally determined and tragically armed. Thousands of miles away, in the deep, fortified bunkers of the Kremlin, the news of the American airstrike sends shockwaves of disbelief, then unbridled fury. Premier Nikita Khrushchev, already reeling from the U-2 incident and the perceived audacity of the American blockade, is now incandescent with rage. He paces frantically, his face florid, a mixture of outrage and dawning horror. He sees this as nothing less than a full-scale invasion, a treacherous act of war, a complete betrayal of any pretense of peaceful resolution. His more hawkish generals, men who have long advocated for a preemptive strike or at least a far more aggressive posture against the imperialists, now have his undivided, furious attention. Men like Marshal Malinowski argue passionately that America has declared war, that the Soviet Union must respond with commensurate force or be forever humiliated and vulnerable. They remind him of past humiliations, of Soviet pride, of the need to deter the American imperialists once and for all. Khrushchev, who had privately prided himself on his strategic cunning, on outmaneuvering the Americans, now feels trapped, his gamble on Cuba backfiring spectacularly. He had truly believed America would not dare such a direct assault. The internal debate, if it can even be called that amidst the panic and rage, is brief and brutal. The arguments for restraint, often championed by more cautious advisors like Foreign Minister Gromyko, are drowned out by the increasingly frantic reports from Cuba and the sheer emotional weight of what has just occurred. The fear of being seen as weak, of allowing the imperialists to gain an irreversible advantage, dominates every thought. The intelligence about the survival of some Cuban missiles and the operational status of tactical nukes lends terrifying credence to the hawk's demands. The red telephone, which in our timeline would become a symbol of de-escalation, remains silent, or is used only to issue commands of destruction. The order comes down, irreversible and world-ending: retaliate. Initially, the order is for tactical nuclear weapons against the perceived American invasion force massing off Cuba and against remaining targets in Florida, the nearest American landmass. Soviet submarines, already lurking like steel predators in the depths of the Caribbean, are given the terrifying green light to use their nuclear torpedoes against U.S. naval vessels enforcing the blockade. The commanders on these submarines, often isolated and operating under immense stress, interpret their standing orders to mean independent launch authority if contact with Moscow is lost or if they are directly attacked. In the confusion, some will launch against any detected U.S. vessel, regardless of its role, simply to fulfill their final mission. And crucially, in a desperate, horrifying gamble, a limited number of the surviving MRBMs in Cuba are readied for launch against U.S. targets. This isn't intended as a first strike to win the war. That concept has ceased to exist the moment the first bombs fell. It is, instead, a chilling, undeniable deterrent by demonstration, a desperate, furious cry from a cornered bear, a final, world-shattering roar. It is meant to show the Americans the true, unimaginable cost of their aggression, to shock them into submission. It achieves only global annihilation. The world holds its breath, but not for long. Within minutes, within hours of the U.S. airstrikes on Cuba, the unthinkable happens. The very fabric of reality tears as the first nuclear fires bloom over American soil. There is no warning. No sirens, no time to flee for the vast majority. Just a blinding, incandescent flash that momentarily turns night into day, followed by a shockwave that obliterates everything in its path. A Soviet R-12 missile, one of the few that survived the initial American onslaught, detonates high above Miami, Florida. The bustling heart of the Sunshine State, a vibrant tapestry of life and dreams, is instantly vaporized. The blast flattens buildings for miles, turns concrete to dust, and incinerates human flesh. The sheer, overwhelming energy released is beyond human comprehension, dwarfing any conventional weapon ever conceived. The immediate heat flash sears everything to ash, followed by a blast wave that travels outward at supersonic speeds, tearing apart structures and bodies alike. For miles around, homes explode, cars are crushed, and people are simply ripped apart. A child's tricycle, left innocently on a sidewalk, is vaporized. A small, carefully tended rose garden vanishes. The sheer absurdity of such immense power unleashed on ordinary life is sickening. The EMP, electromagnetic pulse, effect, a silent killer preceding the physical destruction, fries electronics for hundreds of miles, plunging vast swathes of the southeastern United States into a sudden, inexplicable darkness, long before the physical destruction reaches them. Cars stop dead on highways, planes fall from the sky as their systems fail, power grids collapse, communication networks go silent. The lights literally go out across an entire region, leaving survivors in utter blackness and chaos. Minutes later, another missile, following its pre-programmed trajectory, strikes near Tampa, Florida. This detonation targets MacDill Air Force Base, a key strategic command center for American forces, but its destructive radius engulfs much of the surrounding urban area, wiping out millions of civilians as an act of collateral damage. The horror is compounded by the confusion, by the inability to comprehend what is happening. Millions are dead in an instant, their lives extinguished with a violence beyond human comprehension. The American public, lulled by years of Cold War rhetoric into believing that nuclear conflict was a distant, abstract threat, is plunged into an abyss of horror. Fictional news reports, flickering for agonizing moments before failing completely, show blurry footage of chaos, panicked anchors trying to make sense of the incomprehensible, their voices cracking with unspeakable fear. The horror is absolute. President Kennedy, receiving the fragmented, horrifying news from Florida, feels the ground give way beneath him. The weight of his decision, the unimaginable carnage, crushes him. He sinks into his chair, a man utterly broken, feeling the world split in two around him. The consequences he so desperately tried to avert have materialized with a speed and ferocity no one could have truly imagined. The game is over, and humanity has lost. The world screams, and then falls silent. With American cities burning, with the unimaginable now a stark, terrifying reality, there is no turning back. The fragile restraints that had held the Cold War in check shatter completely. The United States Strategic Air Command, SAC, on high alert for days, now launches its full nuclear arsenal. The protocols are clear, drilled into every officer for decades. A nuclear attack on the homeland mandates a full retaliatory strike. There are no other options, no diplomatic channels left open, no capacity for de-escalation. The machine has begun to move, unstoppable and relentless. From hardened silos hidden beneath the American heartland, colossal ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, each a silent, deadly titan carrying multiple warheads designed to target specific cities and military installations, surge skyward, their engines roaring a hymn of oblivion. A fiery ascent that signals the end of days. Strategic bombers, the iconic B-52s, laden with thermonuclear payloads, roar from their bases, arcing towards Soviet targets across the globe. Some are already airborne on their fail-safe routes, previously ordered to fly towards the USSR with the expectation of receiving a final go/no-go order. Now, they receive the go code, a whispered word that unleashes unimaginable power. Submarines, previously lurking in the deep, silent depths of the oceans, unleash their own devastating payloads, turning the seas into launch pads for humanity's final act, their torpedoes tracking unseen targets in the murky depths. Each launch is a nail hammered into humanity's coffin, a point of no return. The Soviet Union's own massive nuclear deterrent is unleashed in kind. Their ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, from their patrol zones, and strategic bombers loaded with atomic bombs are all committed. The mutual assured destruction, MAD, doctrine, once a theoretical deterrent, a horrifying promise designed to prevent precisely this scenario, becomes a grim, unstoppable reality. It's not about winning, it's about ensuring the destruction of your adversary even as you are destroyed. The automated systems, the fail-safes, the sheer momentum of decades of nuclear planning take over. Decisions made by individuals give way to the cold, unfeeling logic of pre-programmed retaliation, a danse macabre on a global stage. Humanity has lost control of its own fate, becoming a passenger on a one-way journey to oblivion. Within hours, the world as we know it ceases to exist. The elegant dance of civilization, built over millennia, is brutally, efficiently dismantled. Major cities across the United States, the Soviet Union, Europe, and parts of Asia and North Africa are reduced to radioactive rubble. Iconic metropolises, New York, Washington, D.C., Moscow, Leningrad, London, Paris, Berlin, Beijing, Tokyo, Cairo, Sydney, Delhi, each a vibrant center of culture, commerce, and human life, are obliterated, their unique identities dissolved in the fury of fission. The sheer scale of death is beyond human comprehension. Billions are gone in an instant, their lives extinguished, their dreams vaporized into subatomic particles. The Earth, seen from space, is momentarily wreathed in fiery plumes, a horrifying testament to humanity's capacity for self-destruction, a final, catastrophic fireworks display that marks the end of an era. The immediate aftermath of this global nuclear exchange is just the beginning of the nightmare. The monstrous firestorms ignited by the blasts, fueled by the combustible materials of sprawling urban centers, inject colossal amounts of soot, ash, and dust into the atmosphere. These vast plumes of debris rise higher and higher, eventually reaching the stratosphere, where they begin to block out the sun. This triggers a phenomenon now known as nuclear winter, a prolonged period of darkness, freezing temperatures, and devastating climate disruption that will reshape the planet for centuries. Temperatures plummet globally, plunging average temperatures to levels not seen since the Ice Age. The once thriving agricultural regions become frozen wastelands, rendering any large-scale food production impossible. Crops fail universally, leading to mass starvation on an unprecedented scale. The air, once life-giving, becomes unbreathable, choked with toxic smoke, chemical pollutants, and deadly radioactive fallout, carried by the new, chaotic wind patterns. Acid rain falls, scourging the land, dissolving remnants of civilization and stripping forests bare. The oceans, once teeming with life, become increasingly acidic and barren, their complex ecosystems collapsing, their vast biodiversity decimated. The world, once vibrant and alive, becomes a dying planet, suffocating under a blanket of ash and despair, a monument to human folly. The relentless, chilling winds howl through the ruins, carrying the dust of a billion souls. In this ravaged, poisoned world, survival is not a testament to strength or foresight, but a cruel, arbitrary lottery. A tiny fraction of humanity, those fortunate enough to be in deep, fortified shelters, or in extremely remote, unstrategic areas, might endure the initial blasts. But even for them, the world they emerge into is a desolate, poisoned landscape, a grim reflection of their deepest fears, a distorted mirror of the world that once was. Communication networks are utterly destroyed. The digital age, the interconnectedness of nations, the vast web of information and commerce, is a distant, forgotten memory. The intricate global supply chains, the very arteries of modern life, vanish in an instant. Governments cease to exist, their leaders vaporized or lost in the chaos, their authority dissolved in the face of universal anarchy. The very concept of nations, of borders, of ideologies, becomes meaningless in the face of universal desolation. The few remaining pockets of humanity struggle against a relentless tide of unimaginable suffering, radiation sickness, a slow, agonizing death that ravages the body from within, causing internal bleeding, hair loss, relentless nausea, and eventually organ failure, starvation, as all organized food production has ceased and uncontaminated supplies dwindle, leading to desperate foraging and brutal competition, and the bitter, unrelenting cold of the nuclear winter, forcing desperate survivors to seek shelter in the skeletal remains of buildings, huddling together against the biting wind. They are alone, utterly alone, in a world stripped bare of everything familiar. Scavenging becomes the only means of survival, sifting through the ruins of a lost civilization for canned goods, uncontaminated water, anything to prolong a miserable existence. Despair becomes the universal currency, a crushing weight on the soul. Trust, community, and empathy often crumble under the strain of desperate survival, replaced by a brutal, every man for himself mentality. Humanity reverts to its most primal, desperate state, its dreams of progress and enlightenment reduced to ash. Decades crawl by. The nuclear winter gradually recedes, the sun a pale, sickly disk in a perpetual twilight sky, offering little warmth or comfort. But the damage inflicted on the planet is irreparable. The Earth is scarred, its once thriving ecosystems shattered beyond recognition. Radiation levels remain dangerously high in vast areas, particularly around former population centers and military targets, leading to widespread mutations in the surviving flora and fauna, and a grim prevalence of cancers, birth defects, and chronic illnesses in the remnants of humanity. The rich biodiversity that once flourished, a testament to millions of years of evolution, is decimated, with countless species rendered extinct, leaving a barren, impoverished genetic landscape. The intricate web of life is torn beyond repair, replaced by resilient, but often mutated, forms of life, a terrifying echo of evolution. New, primitive societies might eventually emerge from the ashes, if humanity survives at all. Small, isolated, agrarian communities, clinging to the few habitable pockets of land where radiation levels have fallen to somewhat survivable levels. Their knowledge of the old world would be fragmentary, gleaned from tattered, decaying books found in ruins, or whispered legends passed down through generations, often distorted and misinterpreted, becoming myths and parables of a lost golden age. They would live in a world of ghosts, surrounded by the monumental, decaying infrastructure of a civilization they could never hope to comprehend or rebuild. The great cities, now skeletal ruins overgrown with mutant vegetation, would stand as silent, terrifying monuments to humanity's folly, eerie reminders of a greatness that destroyed itself. They might even become sacred or cursed sites, avoided by the superstitious and fearful survivors, a testament to a forgotten apocalypse. They would never know the beauty, the complexity, or the vibrant interconnectedness of the world that was. They would live in the perpetual shadow of the greatest cataclysm in human history, a constant, agonizing reminder of how close we came to the brink and how, in this horrific timeline, we fell. Their future would be a bleak struggle against a hostile, unforgiving planet, forever bearing the scars of the day humanity chose annihilation. The legacy of their ancestors would be not triumph, but an apocalyptic warning etched into the very dust they walked upon. This alternate history, while chilling in its scope and terrifying in its implications, serves a profound, perhaps humanity's most crucial, purpose. It underscores the fragility of peace, not as a given, but as a constant, precarious achievement requiring eternal vigilance and wise stewardship. It highlights the catastrophic consequences of miscalculation, the ease with which fear, pride, and rigid ideology can override reason, leading to unimaginable devastation for all. It emphasizes the immense, terrifying responsibility that leaders carry on their shoulders, knowing that their choices dictate the fate of billions. The Cuban Missile Crisis in our timeline wasn't just a historical event, it was a testament to humanity's capacity to pull back from the abyss, to choose dialogue over destruction, to prioritize the survival of the species over the immediate gratification of perceived strength or ideological purity. It reminds us that history is not predetermined. It is shaped by choices, by the courageous and often agonizing decisions made in moments of unimaginable pressure, by individuals who, despite their flaws, understood the ultimate cost of failure. And the choices made in those 13 days in October 1962 determined not just the fate of nations, but the very existence of life on Earth. The fact that we are here, watching this, discussing this, is a testament to the fact that, in our reality, the right choice was made. The silence of the nuclear winter, the absence of life, is a deafening counterfactual that we must always remember. This grim thought experiment is a stark, eternal warning. Never forget the brink. The lessons of that October must echo through generations, a constant reminder of the thin line between existence and oblivion. The future of humanity depends on our capacity to learn from this terrifying what-if. We must continually strive for understanding, for empathy, and for the wisdom to choose diplomacy over destruction every single time.